All right, so we're back, and the next question that I had for you was we're using a lot of music, horror music, inspirational music, scene music to the story itself. And how do you think that that music impacts the story? And, like, how, I guess, do you do this often? Do you typically use scene music and stuff like that?
I get yes, I try to. Kind of like when I made Ophelia's profile, it had all of her theme song, well, I think two of her theme songs in it, which were I think really sad. Yep, really sad. Um, so I always have to find either when I'm drawing or when I'm writing, I have to find appropriate thematic music in order to write. Otherwise, I just can't do it. So I figured, well, why not put it in here so you can see what I'm listening to while writing and what I think is the tone I want to set. Like I remember one of the ones with the Dark Man. It wasn't like terrifying music. It was more like creepy, twisted, sad, because her mind is more or less melting. And it wasn't like, oh no, she needs to run for her life. It's more like, well, is no longer really a human being anymore, and she's kind of like a little puddle on the floor. So I wanted to distinguish between her mind and the writing piece.
And you think the music helps reflect that?
Yeah, plus it's fun.
Okay, so during this time that she's upstairs, the torture sort of came to a slowing pause. Not so much stopped, but that really took a back seat to his physical and emotional abuse, and the psychological aspects really took a step up. And how did she, I guess, start to lose distinguishing between reality and this new life of physical abuse, emotional abuse, psychological torture, mind control? Like, all of this had really taken a step up compared to when she was in the basement. Now he's training her to kind of do what he wants her to do, and even the smallest thing, wearing the wrong outfit, stuff like that, would lead to physical abuse. Now, this is something I was highly unfamiliar with. Like, at least with the kidnapping, I had read books and I had watched some shows and stuff like that. But with physical abuse, it's not something they really display a lot in shows. And what they do display isn't really accurate to what I needed to be able to present. So, how did she really start losing the reality of her situation and accepting what was being presented? Like, what was the whole mindset with this?
So it's very typical behavior of a person that's been abused. Well, there's different types of abuse, so like I guess that's a kind of a disclaimer of like I'm not stating that this summarizes all relational abusive partnerships, but it is a generic vision of a stereotypical power and control mindset of an abuser and their victim. So I will go into that saying that. Um, but from my training and from personal experience, when you're in an abusive relationship like that, the person who is the abuser, who's in control, wants to regain and keep the power and control. So they will use things like isolation, minimalizing behaviors, denying, blaming, emotional abuse, intimidation, uh, coercion. Uh, I guess even he used economic abuse because he took away all her stuff, um, and said like, "Well, I did all this, da 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 da. I bought this, I did this." Um, so she ends up believing that it's all her fault. He never did anything wrong. This, of course, is all of her doing. Um, all of her, the she begins to justify everything that he does because, oh well, he did it because he cares. Oh, he did it because he's protecting me, or he wants me to be stronger, or I should feel bad because I made him upset. It's all my fault. So the victim begins to internalize um, the behavior because being with that person, regardless of the abuse or not, is more important than being alone. And that for her is the biggest piece because if she's alone, she's in the damn basement again with the raviolis, and she doesn't want that. So she has to identify with him and to care about him, even if she's going through hell to get there.
And this kind of led to the first time he took her outside the cabin, right? He was going jogging, her favorite activity, and he wanted her
Mm,
to go
mm,
with him. And
mm-hmm.
on their way back, he kind of expected her to run away, right? To try to make an escape and escape the area, get away. This is the first time she's seeing just how massive the woods are, how far and deep they are into them. But instead, she made a straight beeline back to the cabin. Why was that?
So she was engaging in grounding behaviors. So the forest is foreign. She has no idea what's out there. So she starts to catastrophize what could be out there. Um, are there animals? Are there other people? At that point, people are now bad. People are no longer good because anybody who isn't Luke is automatically bad because God knows what could happen if more people show up in her life that are not invited. Um, so the cabin is safe. The cabin has rules. The cabin is predictable. It's kind of like a kid when you shake up their routine. And so it's similar for her that the cabin is a routine, and being away from it causes her immense anxiety. So all she wants to do is go back. Once she's back, she knows what to expect.
Right, and she kind of expected a punishment there when she got back. One of the things that she started being required to do was cleaning, cooking, um, stuff like this. And what inspired her? Like, how did she view cooking at that time? Like, I know it was a big deal for her to learn this. She really wanted to. She at least showed the implication that she wanted to learn this. How did you go into that thought, the whole cooking process and learning some new skill that Ophelia had never had before?
So at that point, she's still kind of doesn't know what to do with herself. Her mind just continues to wander. So she figured, well, if she can at least do this, she doesn't really like cleaning. She didn't like cleaning. I think she still doesn't like cleaning, especially when things are not put where she wants them to be put. That upsets her greatly. So that also feeds into possible OCD that she is currently developing. But the cooking gave her an outlet to do something. And then it gets like later on, it gets into that maternal thing that also is just a whole sub context of her
Right, and
everything.
you just briefly mentioned that she strongly dislikes disorganization, clothing on the floor, a dirty bathtub, an unmade bed. Um, is this part of her core character, or is this something she developed over time?
That is who she is as a person. She's very organized. She does she had a maid, but whenever she would like move something or take something or do something with an object, she'd always put it back immediately where it needed to go in her house. Like she had the hamper. She organized her entire closet by color and season because that's just the kind of person that she is. So if she sees the bed being unmade or the clothes on the floor, she gets very upset because she doesn't see the reasons why everything can't go exactly where it needs to go.
And like the cuffs were another thing that kind of would require a little explanation. Um, she she finally got the chance to have the cuffs taken off when she was, taking baths and so forth like that. And one of the things that she showed is that she wanted them put back on right away. Like she was very uncomfortable without these cuffs on her ankle. Why was that?
Um, it was yet again, it was the behavior that was familiar to her. She knew that if they were on, she could depend on them and that she wouldn't have to worry. Also, she would abuse herself a lot. So when they were off, there like she could see be compelled to want to hurt herself again, which comes to like the razors and the all the other stuff with the nails and the mattress coils and all that kind of stuff. She would do it a little bit with the cuffs on, but if they were upstairs, she didn't feel compelled to do that.
And this led to Ophelia finally seeing the Dark Man out of the basement. And should we expect to see him again in the story? Why was he out of the basement? And kind of, is he following her around? Will we see him again now that she's left the cabin?
Uh, that's hard hard to answer because I want to surprise you.
Okay, then don't answer
One
it.
could say maybe.
Maybe. Okay. Um, and this led into one of our another dark kind of overturn, which was the cabin hoppers. Right? We had a guy show up at the cabin. He intended to rob them. He was trying to figure out if they were worth robbing. And Leah had the chance to scream for help during this time, and she chose not to. She chose instead to do what he said and hide. Why was that?
Because in that situation, she's far more terrified of Luke than she is of the person entering the house.
Sorry?
She's far more terrified of Luke than she is of the cabin hopper because the cabin hopper doesn't really have anything to offer. She's seen what Luke can do. She knows what he could do to her if it backfires. So it's easier for her and safer for her just to be quiet.